Today is Monday, October the 11th, 2021, 9 a.m. This is a Bastrop Economic Development Corporation meeting and workshop. I'll check first to see if we have any public comments. Angela, anything to?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. So before we get started, I'd like to introduce Jennifer Wall, goes by Jen. She comes to us from the digital technology workforce. She's been working with a company that specializes in the cloud platforms. She has a deep understanding of workforce development, and she does lots of training as we all move into the digital economy. So we welcome her. She comes out of the ETJ, the colony. So now we have 2 ETJs, and the rest of us, I think, are city. So welcome. Don't be shy. Ask any questions that you have, and we are really appreciative that you're here. So before we get started today, let me just kind of snapshot where we're going and where we hope to get. The topic is the industrial park, the business and industrial park. We're going to start off with a history that Angela will present about how we came up with a business and industrial park. We're going to talk about the performance agreement, or actually the development agreement from 2013 and the amendment to that. We're going to examine the toad designation as it impacts the industrial park. And then Jean is going to provide 2 snapshots. The early discussions of what they thought they would do with the industrial park, what to do where, and then just kind of lump together what the newer thinking is about the industrial park, just so you have a comparison analysis of where we've been and what the latest thinking is. It would be terrific if today, when we leave, if we could accomplish maybe 3 things. We could take a look once again at what seems to be a roadblock on the codes in the industrial park, and to walk away with a direction for the development department as to the EC designation for the industrial park. We'd probably be really well advised if we think we have enough information on the toad to determine whether we're going to go through a study or we're going to go through possibly some trade receipts. I'm not sure that I have the terminology correct, but we're going to take a look at that. And then if we could get to a determination about whether we want to continue with the amendment of the 2013 agreement, or if we want to undertake a new development agreement. Though if we were to walk away with that, that would be terrific. After we go through the presentations of where we've been and where we are, we hope to have at least 2 hours of open discussion with these maps, talking through what to do, how to do. I don't know that we'll come to a determination now, but we are certainly going to spend a lot of time reviewing all the options, and then we will schedule another workshop, I think tentatively, and I'd like people to check their calendars, if I'm not mistaken, November the 5th, which is a Friday, because we want to bring in an expert with a lot of experience in regards to this to give us more additional information. So let's get started. Yes, ma'am.
Madam Chair, really quick, I just wanted to kind of let you guys know what is in front of you and how it's supposed to function.
Okay.
Obviously, we have the slides that we will be showing you. You have a printed packet with note area off to the right-hand side. The correlating maps that are within the presentation are blown up much bigger, and they are in sequential order. And on each page of the maps, it does have the slide number for reference. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask us. We're also going to try our best to not bore you to death, but there is a lot of information, so please bear with us. Today is definitely a learning experience for everyone. We've thrown a little fun, hopefully, into the slide to kind of lighten the mood and help us kind of get through some of this tedious information. So thank you.
Okay, Jean just did everything I was going to do. So let's start with the history of the BEDC's Bastrop Business and Industrial Park. If you would, you've got the, if it doesn't work, click on the speaker. Here we go.
Hopefully we're not going back that far. we are going back to the beginning.
Okay. That's the most fun this is going to be all day, guaranteed. Okay, so the BEDC was incorporated in 1995. The City of Bastrop voters approved the adoption of a half-cent sales tax. In other words, 1/2 of 1% sales tax. It equals the same thing. And they had their first meeting on April 4th, 1995. We've done a deep dive into records that Jean and I have never even laid eyes on. We felt that some of this needed to be laid as groundwork before we get into the industrial park part. Those were our founding members there you're looking at. Mayor David Locke was, he was mayor and president at that time. Some of those, unfortunately, are no longer with us. Dr. Gerwitz passed away just a couple of weeks ago. It was sad. He was a really nice man. For the first 2 years, they didn't seem to have any staff members. City manager Mike Talbot served in the capacity of an executive director for the first 2 years. Their first actual director that they hired was in 1997, and they hired an administrative assistant the following month. In April 1996, they purchased 2 tracts of property from Mary Bell Turner Gore. That's a mouthful. I didn't think to put a map up here, but if you'll envision any of the maps you have there in front of you of the industrial park, it's the 265-acre park as we refer to it, and it's also a 7-acre down at the bottom left, southwest, and it looks like an upside-down L. Yeah. Okay. That was, in fact, the lot that Sam kept questioning about as to why we had it. We bought it at the same point. We were also supposed to apparently purchase 49 acres that fronted Highway 71, but I couldn't find why that didn't happen. The entire purchase was $574,000 and some change. They held their official groundbreaking on December 18th, 1997. As you can see, there's absolutely nothing in the background. Jean, you threw that in there. Was there specific?
Well, just to show kind of the initial kind of development was
okay.
Kind of forward.
That is an old plat. Okay. So the first business to locate in the park was Garments to Go in 1998, and they were followed quickly by Dig Tac and Deep in the Heart Art Foundry. There's some pictures of some of the other businesses over there.
When was Camco?
2013, they opened in 2014. Yeah, so you're going to go through these real quick, they're going to pop up. Okay, so this is just a visual of how they popped up or how they came on board. Yeah, let's see, you've got Coghlan, Deep in the Heart Art Foundry, Vargas, Dig Tac was 06. You got the Art Warehouse, okay, Jamco. Elliott Electric was 2015, AEI 2016. The county bought that Vargas building in 2017. And then also in 2017, Coghlan was not merged, but they were acquired by a UK company called Caligore. And then most recently, the Art Foundry purchased the former DigTech building, and that is part of Gummy Bears, the project. And these are the three that we're currently working. That just gives you a quick overview of when everything happened, the square footage, the valuation, acreage. I think, Jean, you and I, we took DigTech and kind of lumped it in. Okay, that's why it's not there.
I think the other part of this that is extremely important to remember too is the EDC purchased the property for $567,000-ish. And to date, the current tax valuations of those buildings that are currently in the industrial park is $14,796,237. I think that was money well spent to come back to the community. We've put a total of 201,635,000 square feet on the ground, and consisting of just under 54 acres total.
Just as an aside, something I thought of that I saw digging through the old records, best I could tell, their annual budget back then was somewhere between $300,000 and $400,000. That was all they had. So that first purchase they made and the initial infrastructure they put in was a $2.3 million bond.
Can you go back to the map that shows?
Which part?
So would you show, just for, and it may be helpful to Jen. It certainly would be helpful for me. Looking at this map, we're going to be talking a lot about an agreement and sections 1 and sections 2 through 6. Can you show us where section 1 is and show us the balance of 2 through 6?
Actually, okay, so this,
Okay.
and basically these lines here to here, that is phase 1. Everything within basically the developed areas minus Mocha over, minus this piece right here, everything else is in phase 1. It is complete, yes, and we will get into that later in the presentation, but yes.
Well, this is just a good overview.
Sure.
How, if that was 1, why wasn't everything else 2? What made it be, how did they come up with the different, what made section 2, what made section 3, what made section 4?
Let me see if I can get, hold on, it's this one. There is the one. Oop. So back when the city at the time, the city and the EDC hired BEFCO to evaluate the park for the additional phases, BEFCO named them. And then, as you will see when we get later in the presentation and start going through the different variations of layouts, you will see that BEFCO labeled them different every single time. So it has been very challenging to identify the true phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, phase 5, and phase 6. The other very confusing thing is the way this development was subdivided, the legal name for each of the lots in the industrial park start with the word phase 1. And so from a legal identification standpoint, and then from a master plan standpoint, it can get very confusing because none of them match. Okay, good, I'm glad.
Thank you, that makes me feel better. While you're on that one, show us where Mocha's property is.
Yes, ma'am. It's actually not on this map, so.
So it's in, would
No,
have phase
so.
4, whatever they would have called it?
It is actually not on, does not appear on, so Mocha is going to go in this triangle right here.
Okay, so it's phase, who
It's
knows, not 1.
Even, yeah, it's not even shown on the development agreement map, so. Okay. All right, let me go backwards.
Okay, so to elaborate on what June was talking about. So when I started at the EDC in 2008, this is what we had. That was all that was platted. Nothing below the power line had been touched. So the Jamco project was the impetus for that infrastructure being put in. That was another bond that the EDC took out in 2013. Part was for the industrial park, and the other part was for the Main Street project. So as we developed the infrastructure, the extension of Technology Drive down to the Jamco property, it also allowed us to plat 2 other properties to the west. It also included 2 detention ponds, one down in the lower left corner and one up in the right of that triangle. So if you'll go to the next, just if you'll go to the next slide when we put Jamco in, you'll see what I'm talking about. It just magically appears. So yeah, keep going forward and you can see where we are now. That should be it. There you go. So all of that's been completed. And the way we read the agreement is that is phase 1. MOCA is not. Phases 2 through 6 were never defined in the development agreement.
But they're part of phase 1.
Right.
Yeah, they're part of the completed phase 1 from an infrastructure standpoint, which is really what the development agreement really focuses on.
Do y'all have any other questions on where we are now? I know we kind of rushed through that a little bit, but. Hmm?
The blue triangular wedges are what?
Detention ponds,
Okay.
Yeah.
retention ponds. My bad.
When you do bad, you go to
Yes.
detention.
One or the other.
And I think it's important to also point out that those are not just detention ponds, those are regional detention ponds. So they do incorporate flow within their region, not just for a single site.
That's a great point, because when I first was hired, they were asking every person who developed a lot in the park to put in their own detention or retention, whichever the case may be. And eventually they got to the point that they said regional would make more sense. It would be an incentive to bring in more developers.
And if I could add, Jamco actually triggered, their development is what triggered the development of one of the ponds that opened up 2 other properties and made them sellable properties.
Yes, so I'll add to that. The original phase of Jamco did not. However, they expanded the size of their building, which triggered the remainder part of phase 1, which is basically from here down, which also helped us get this detention pond as well as this one. And Project Superglue, according to the plans, actually can use this as well. And I think it's important to, and you know, most of you understand a lot of this, but I just want to make sure we're very clear, is what that allows from the regional detention standpoint, what that allows us to do is provide more developable property for these companies that are coming in. So kind of centralizing and locating those in very specific areas allows flow to go in and capture before it goes south, and then also allow more developable property.
I'm ready to fail. I knew we'd be tag teaming this. That's the second most fun thing that's going to happen. In case any of y'all have never heard the Houston toad, most people don't realize they're only about this big. They range to what, 3 to 5 inches? Did I get that right? They're not very big. The babies are just like a little pea in your hand. So Houston ran them all out years and years ago. We ended up with them. I want to personally rename them the Lost Pines toad, but nobody's allowed me to do that yet. They've been on the endangered species list since 1970. The largest known population is here in Bastrop County. That sound you just heard was recorded in Bastrop County. They like the state park in particular. They like the trees. They like the soil. Now, this is what a lot of people don't understand is that it really is a United States Fish and Wildlife program. On the local level, Bastrop County assists with the program, but there are certain things that they cannot do. Did I say that? Okay. So as far as the history with the Houston toad is concerned, there's some missing pieces. The first thing we found was it was a letter from the current city manager at the time to U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and it was dated November 6, 1995. He offered to place 89 acres of property into a conservation area. It did not come out and say industrial park. The industrial park wasn't actually purchased until April of 1996. That's the missing piece. We're not sure how that came about. Moving forward, it came back up in May of '99. The director at the time had to explain that the toad habitat and the conservation area are not the same thing. They are, in fact, two completely different designations. The minutes from July and August of 2004 indicate that the board was requesting additional information. It was apparent from the minutes that they were unclear as to what the conservation area, what you could and could not do in it. So after they did some research, they determined that there were no restrictions or deregulation of land use within the conservation area. And then it fast forwarded to 2009, they again started talking about the Houston toad because Global Tower wanted to put a cell tower in the park. And so it became a possible issue as to whether or not the toads existed there. After that, that seemed to be the trigger for the entire board and staff to begin discussing how to get the 84 acres out of the conservation area.
Will you explain the difference between the 89 and the 84?
Oh, can I? I thought you were going to. It literally said 89 in one instance and 84 in the next. I assume that had to do with some easements.
It also could have had to do with Bluebonnet Substation down in the lower southeastern corner.
You were correct. That would have been 2009 timeframe. That's probably it. So as part of their due diligence on the Houston toad, they initially did a habitat assessment in 2009. The results were not conclusive, and they then learned that that wasn't really the kind of habitat assessment they needed done in the first place. That was my takeaway from it. So in 2010, they had Horizon Environmental perform a habitat assessment. It was not completely conclusive. Is that correct? Yeah, I'm thinking. The one in 2011 was unfortunately done during the, no, I'm sorry, that was 2012. In 2011, they suggested doing a third one, which we did, and it unfortunately coincided with the Bastrop complex fires. So the final, you can switch over to the next one. In December 2013, the final response was received from Fish and Wildlife Service. They indicated that 2012 wasn't a good year to do a study, and they didn't really give us an answer as to whether we could proceed or not, but the consultant said in an email to the director at the time that in their opinion, we could develop the property with no problem because we had met all of our obligations. And so moving forward after that, the conservation area was included as land available for development in all of our marketing materials. Is this where you pick up? Okay, let me see if I can help.
So we'll talk, and by no means am I an expert or going to try to be the expert. Carrie Croft is the Houston Toad Bastrop County expert. Unfortunately, she could not be here today and would like to come to our next board meeting to really dive into what the options are and what the process is of developing within the Houston Toad. And I would like to start out with the fact that it is possible. There are many options to do so, and it really comes down to time and money, just like all development. And this is the Lost Pines Habitat Conservation Area application process, just to give you a high-level overview of kind of what the process is, how to get started, how to develop within the toad habitat. I'm not going to read through it. You guys can definitely review that if you need to. If you do have questions, please ask, and I might be able to answer them. Here are just the highlights of how to work within the conservation area, and I want to make sure that we're clarifying the difference between their definition and defined lines of the Lost Pines Conservation Area, and then we will also define the BEDC's conservation area in our industrial park, because they are two very different things. So first and foremost, I try to make this very simple and to the point, but work directly with Fish and Wildlife Service. It is a lengthy process. It's just a very detailed federal process that you have to go through. The second option is to conduct a Houston toad study, which is what we did. It takes 3 to 4 years, depending on the property and how much you're wanting to develop. The conversation that we had with Carrie was, this is really only good if you're ready to break ground the day you get your results back. Because if you wait a year, they could be in your area again, and the study would be kind of null and void at that point. She said that's a very challenging one to kind of get really any clearance to move forward. It's also extremely costly. The other option is to work directly with the Lost Pines Habitat Conservation Plan, which is the Bastrop County team. It is efficient and cost-effective, as you saw on the previous page. The other option is to use the Houston Toad credits, which you may also have to do in conjunction with any of the other 3 options, depending, again, on your development, the size, what you're wanting to do, and how you're wanting to do it. I think what this has shown us is, again, I go back to, it is possible to develop in the Houston Toad area. There are obviously a lot of different restrictions that you look at outside of normal development. The other thing is there are also, depending on the size of your lot, depends on the percentage that is developable. And again, that's defined on how big and how small your lot size is. And I do want to strictly state too that all development within the Houston Toad Conservation Area must be approved by LPHCP for compliance, because they have to refer to the federal government. We have to remember that this is not a local thing, this is a federal requirement. Okay, so we're gonna move on in, and I'm sure Angela and I will probably tag team on this too as we go through. But let me go back, I'm so sorry. Does anybody have any questions about the Houston Toad and development process?
Who pays the credits? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry?
Who pays the credits, us or the developer?
The developer,
Okay.
or whomever the landowner wants to develop on the property.
And we're saying that all of the industrial park is located in the Lost Pines?
No, ma'am, there's only a portion, and I will get to that map in just 1 second.
Okay.
If I can figure out what button to push. All right, so we're now into the business park expansion portion of the presentation. So this is our existing plat of the industrial park. Basically, this kind of very defined square. You can see the black line that kind of outlines it. That was when the city pulled it into the city limits, so that is the city limits line.
You want to show where the toad is?
Well, I have a map.
Oh, okay.
Just be patient, everyone. Goodness gracious. Okay, so this is, I will point out kind of where we're at though. So just north here is 71, and this is Jackson Street that comes in. This is Business Park Drive, this is Technology Drive. And this is the boundaries. I'm not very good with this pointer, so y'all be patient with me. So this here is the industrial park. This is the gas line easement, and then this is the LCRA easement that comes across the property. So I pulled these from the city's website just so everybody is very clear, the future land use is, if you look here, this is our industrial park, and you look at the oh my gosh, the layers, industrial is notified as the use of this park. And then we are located now in what is considered the character district, Pine Valley, which again is here. We are all, this is Highway 71 here. So basically everything south within this kind of commercial area is considered Pine Valley. And again, it's just a character district.
This is slide 36 for any of you that want to look it up on the bigger map. Like that.
And character districts do have different development processes that you can and cannot do. But I wanted to show you guys what. Oop, I'm sorry. The purple color, the light purple indicates Pine Valley right here. Pine Village. I mean Pine Village, Pine Valley. Yes, Pine Village is the actual, again, character district. I think it's important to understand that there are different kind of formats, but so if you go back, so this is future land use, right? And then you go forward and you've got the character districts.
And the gray block in the middle then is, again, the problem is so many of those are purple colors. It's tough to tell.
So,
I'm trying to follow
of course.
the
So the gray in the middle, that is most of the county property, and they are a planned development. So that's why that's different colored.
Because we haven't shown the county property in any of the other maps.
And then here you've got the 3 zoning types that are within our industrial park. So you have the gray area, which is considered EC, or Employment Center. You have the light purple, which is considered Rural Residential, or P2. And then you also have this dark purple, which is most of the property that is already developed. You have MHMR and then Garments to Go in that area right there. It is considered core commercial residential. And I also want to point out too, I haven't been able to find it on one of these maps, but this very top sliver of that 10.5 most northwestern property right here is also, which I did note there, but that does fall within the Iredell district. It's about half of that property. And I think it's important to note that because, it is indicated with this yellow line right here, but it's not like cut out. So I think it's important to note that because it does affect how a building is located, what materials can be used, and really kind of that public-facing aspect of that portion of the property. So we're going to now go into all of the lovely variations that we were able to get our hands on. I will try to go through these as quickly as possible because they're really more of a visual just to kind of see how the different boards and people involved over the years have evaluated what the industrial park should look like outside of phase 1. So as you can see here, this is pretty much, again, everything south of the LCRA easement.
This is slide 39 on the big maps.
So you've got the U shape with one southern connector. And again, you have, I don't really even know what shape that is, but with a little bit more curvature in the roadways.
I believe I remember them saying U and Y.
There you go, U and Y. What? Yeah, there you go, wishbone, I like that. And then here again, I want to reiterate, please, please, please do not pay attention. Well, I think it's important to pay attention to the way that everything is renamed every time it's redrawn. So none of these indicators, so that phase one is actually, like, that was long done. And so they renamed it again. I'm not really sure what the rationale with that was, but here we are. Go ahead.
Well, I can remember back then wondering why they did that. It seemed like every time BEFCO gave us some engineering layouts, they always started over with phase one. It felt like we never moved past a phase one. And I didn't understand it then, and I don't understand it now, but apparently they did not reference any of the prior plans. They started over fresh every time.
Oh, I will go back and just reference this. So that previous plan, that example, the OPC, or cost of estimate on that, would have been $2.8 million at that point in time in 2014. Again, here's another one that actually shows more of the, what is considered the conservation area. That this portion right here is actually where the Bluebonnet Electric substation is, which is why it's kind of carved out of most everything from this point forward. But again, as you can see, you've got phase one, phase two, futures 2, 3, 4, which here's 3 and 4. And again, no reference to any of the northern part of the property. Not the 10.5, not the 9.7, and not the upper part of the original 89 acres. So this gets us into 2015, which I think most of you have seen this at some point in time. That is slide 43 for your reference. And we apologize that it is sideways, but it was the only way to not completely squish it. Yeah. So as you can see here, this is the first time really that the entire property is being incorporated. And once again, this is the 10.5 acre property on the northwest side of the industrial park. Never been included in any of the original build out, which was phase one here. And now all of a sudden it's called phase one. Excuse me. Yes, sir.
Sorry, if you go back, there's the roadway that goes out to the upper side, that uncolored.
This one?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And it dumps into a block, and that block of property is BEDC owned?
Yes, sir. That is a correct statement. Again, right here, it actually says BEDC on it. I know it's
Right.
itty bitty, but BEDC does own this piece of property right here. And Angela, if you could help me kind of tell the story of the board going after this access point back in the day, and the discussions that were had in regards to that access point.
The only thing I really found was where, let's see, Mr. Talbot was back by that point, and he was in charge. He was interim, I think, at this point, wasn't he?
Yes.
In those minutes, he commented that he had purchased that lot on behalf of the BEDC. That was really all I found. So I don't know. Maybe we have some missing conversations somewhere, but.
Okay. And then if you go back to the other drawing that showed the U and the wishbone with the highlight, those two, there's 2 gray blocks. Are those also both owned by BEDC, or why are those highlighted gray?
Those are not purchased by the BEDC. Actually went through the CAD trying to make sure that we didn't own some additional property that we weren't aware of. But those are all privately owned. There are quite a few homes down in that area now. Now, again, back in 2010, that could have been a different scenario.
It was. I just remembered. There was discussion about putting an emergency access gated for emergency use only down in that area. And there were a lot of folks who lived in Tahitian Village and the surrounding areas that didn't like that idea. They did not want a road coming through their neighborhood. So I think that may have been why the whole idea was scrapped.
I think some of those conversations may have been different pre and post complex fire.
Absolutely.
So I think
For
that's
sure.
the timing and the actual purchasing of the property. It would make sense that access became a higher priority for the whole community.
So if you look on this slide, you also see that roadway coming out this way, proposed. Yes. Before I go any further, does anybody have any additional questions? And again, I do want to also point out, if you see here on this particular one, they actually have a cul-de-sac here. They do not even show Technology Drive coming north. It's there, but it's not part of the kind of full build out. There's a cul-de-sac, and from what Angela and I could kind of dig up, that seemed to be the consensus across the board with the boards over those times, where really kind of every roadway they came up with, it became a cul-de-sac because there was no plan for direct public access. Even some of the information, we ended up going here to South Street and stopping again with a cul-de-sac because that's kind of, that would make it even. Everything here became a cul-de-sac. Here became a cul-de-sac. Some of the southern stuff became cul-de-sacs, and the boards were just like, what's the point? Like, if we're not going to go all the way through and connect, then we're left with cul-de-sacs. And we all know that that's not ideal from a accessibility standpoint. So I've been working with, just information that we have as we've worked with different projects and that sort of thing, and knowledge of past information, looking at, some of the transportation plans and things like that. And again, these are just simply ideas and thoughts. There's nothing concrete until the board decides, but here's an option here. So I don't know where he got this map, but this is built to this point here. So we would take that connector and kind of make more of a point of a 90-degree angle on each side. And if you're thinking truck traffic, trucks don't make good super sharp turns. So like that pointed kind of cul-de-sac area that has been shown on all of the previous maps, those points, that's very difficult to get a big truck in and out of. So we went to more of a structured street kind of format. That is one option. And as companies have been looking at this lower property, we did have someone potentially interested in about 40 acres down here. So this is kind of what spurred these conversations, was what options do we have to make it feasible to put that company down there and pull infrastructure across the gas line and get infrastructure to the southern part of the property. So this one really hugs the gas line, allowing the most usable access to this property that we have remaining. And again, this is the Bluebonnet substation here. And this piece, I believe, right here is the piece of property that the BEDC owns on Mauna Loa that would connect to the south. And again, I want to make sure that we're all very clear on why we looked at those two options the way we did. It was to get the infrastructure to the southern part of the park. If we have a project that defines a piece of property, then we can define how we subdivide that to then look at if we need to do a southern connector, if that's what you all want to do, then we could evaluate how and where that would go. So this kind of gives you a little bit cleaner, I think, visual layout of what that would potentially look like. So for example, this is roughly 40 acres here, which would leave us roughly 50 acres on the other side. The electric substation is just to the southeast. This would be the road structure and pulling all of the utilities. You would have an additional regional detention pond here. This is where Mocha Financial will be going, is within this 26 acres. And then you are left with a 12.6 acre site just to the north. There is a roadway into right here, right on that corner. Yep, South Street runs just to the north here. The cemetery is just to the north of that. And the cell tower is part of that 12.6 acres.
How big is South Street at that point?
It's still an actual road. It's not a very pretty road, but it's a road.
How wide is it?
Two cars can fit across it. Yeah, South Street ends about right here where our property line ends. Maybe even a little bit further. It goes into dirt and a little. Yeah, because the cemetery is directly across the street, right here. Does anybody have any questions at this point?
The blue line showing up, going to the electric substation, is that a right-of-way for the electric company, or are they getting over from outside?
So that is not an easement. Those are literally lines that I drew to show kind of two separate larger lots down at the southern part of the park.
So the access to the electric substation is from either the east or the south, but not from within the
So
BEDC?
They actually
industrial.
run literally just to the south of our property and come up. Everything south of the LCRA easement.
No, I'm talking about the driving. How do they get into the substation?
From Mauna Loa.
They have a Mauna Loa.
Yes, sir, sorry. But I do want to also point out that everything south of the LCRA power line easement is actually in Bluebonnet's territory. So having that substation and having, high users gives us the opportunity, one, to work with Bluebonnet, but also if a company is in need of redundancy or dual power of different sources, Bluebonnet and the city of Bastrop have worked together and have had those conversations, and they would be happy to partner to make sure any company has what they need.
So the two sections there, the 40 acres and the 50 acres, it's being suggested that maybe those could be individual properties for future developers. Those are, because that's a lot larger than anything I saw on the initial list as far as.
That is correct.
Like an acre or two up to 11 acres.
And again, we have been working with a company that was very, very interested in 40 acres as a 1 million square foot facility. So they were looking for a larger piece of property. We have had numerous conversations over the last 12 months with larger users. So again, these are lines on a piece of paper. We can look at it, evaluate it, however we need to do so. But yes, in the past, they did tend to stay with, I think the largest one we saw was like 22 acres was one of the larger lots on some of those other plans. Yes, sir.
Well, I guess it makes sense to have some available in that size range, and if they just never get interested, you could divide it into smaller. That too, yeah.
I would have to say that that's the tendency that we're seeing these days is larger lots. Some of them are very large, but I think Kevin, didn't you comment on this at the previous meeting? We don't want to chop up all of our lots into really small pieces.
No.
That's what we were doing.
My point was just, to not do a whole lot of work that needs to be undone later unless it's necessary to do it. So, you know, let's not build a road that we're gonna have to tear up, and let's, let's, you know, do what needs to be done, but leave it as flexible as possible, but also make it as marketable as possible, because I know certain things need to be done to make it marketable. So, you know, we'll need experts to tell us what that point is, but yeah, that's my deal. Let's not do any more than we need to, but do everything that we need to.
Right, because it seemed like really the discussion is shovel-ready and what shovel-ready means. Because if you are looking for a smaller lot and we need to build a street to make it shovel-ready, doesn't matter who's paying for the street, the physical time it takes for the street extends the ability to be shovel-ready.
Right, yeah, and if there's utilities that need to go to, you know, past where they are now, then, you know, let's do that, but let's not put them somewhere where they need to be moved.
Okay, so this map is basically minus the future thought process. But this really shows you where the existing utilities are. We kind of keep this map somewhat handy when we are talking to prospects right now. This is, as you see below, it kind of defines the different utilities that are in our industrial park. The one thing that is not on this one is our fiber. I do want to make it clear that we do have fiber that basically runs Jackson Street to the cul-de-sac and then back across Business Park Drive and down Technology. There are poles at all of the existing sites that are in our industrial park, including here, so we can pull it north, and then, of course, again, south at each corner, where we can pull it where we need to, south or east.
So, Jean, does the fiber loop, or there is no fiber between Business Park south to the cul-de-sac? Because there's no orange line.
It does. My understanding from Fiberlight, is it does loop because somehow or another, I'm not really sure how they do it, but this is kind of the actual, Deep in the Heart has it at that corner, and so it loops around and comes back to that cul-de-sac. I don't know that it connects back in a true circular format, if that makes sense.
Okay, we always talked about it being the fiber loop. I thought it looped. But,
and from that standpoint too, you got to think cloud-ish,
yeah,
not physical. Does anybody have any questions about the utilities? So I just threw this in here for fun. This is a really old transportation map from 1964 that I found online. I thought it was really cool, thought I would add it. Wow, have we changed as not only a county, but as a city since then. Little bitty spots of gridded streets and that sort of thing. So I just wanted to share that. So this is, again, pulled from the city's website, from their transportation plan. As you can see here, this is our industrial park. The white lines are the future roads and the future connectors. And then this is the county's transportation plan that they have, that I pulled, again, just the last couple of days. They do show Jackson Street coming awkwardly weird across. I wish it was a little more defined, but I mean, it is a new, it says new facilities, or facility is how that's classified, but coming across, and just to give you reference, this is Lover's Lane right here, and then this piece of property that's kind of awkwardly shaped is the 7 acres that is across on the west side of the railroad tracks that the BEDC does own.
Where are the railroad tracks on that? I know there's a set.
Yes, ma'am. I will show you. Basically, again, if I could, you know.
You're better at it than I am.
Basically, right here is
Okay.
the railroad tracks. Yes, sir. It's on the west side of the tracks. Yep. So they run literally kind of this line, that city limits line right there. It is. Does anybody have any questions about those two maps of the transportation plans that the city and the county have? All right. Now I think I get to pass it over to Ms. Young to present to you guys well, before I go forward, I guess, does anybody have any questions about any of the maps or any of the towed information or anything priorly presented? Take it away, Ms. Young.
Around, and if y'all will take one and of the maps and of the packets as well. So I think we need to look at what was the reason for the original agreement and what triggered that. And it was triggered by Jamco wanting to develop in the industrial park. And for those who do not know, Jamco was started in 1981. They produced glass and aluminum systems on high-rise office buildings. And at the time they were looking at Bastrop, the Texas market was increasing for them, and that's why they chose Bastrop.
They're originally based in Marietta, Georgia, just
Correct,
FYI.
yes.
So they were establishing a Texas regional area.
Thank you. And the original agreement was signed in June of 2013. And shortly after that, the reason for the agreement, though, was that the proposed infrastructure improvements for the company did not comply with the city's subdivision regulations, so a development agreement needed to be created for that purpose. And so they signed the agreement in June of 2013. Then the first amendment was actually signed in November of 2013. But in July of 2013, Mike Talbot informed the BEDC board of Jamco's intent to expand the project and hire additional employees. And that would be an added cost of about $500,000 to expanding the infrastructure from what they originally looked at. And I think I've already mentioned this, the additional infrastructure improvements would prepare 2 additional lots for sale. So under the first amended agreement, the BEDC is obligated to complete infrastructure throughout the park in phases, beginning with phase 1, but continuing on and following through phases 2 through 6. Any questions, comments? And also included in the First Amendment agreement, because no existing development in the park has involved construction of pedestrian sidewalks, and such walkways are generally not an amenity found in industrial parks, installations of sidewalks is not required in your First Amended agreement. And it would also not be required in any future development of the park, so phases 2 through 6, if you maintain the current agreement. BEDC is not required to perform a traffic impact analysis in the phase 1. However, a traffic impact study is required in other developments in the park, phases 2 through 6. So, Article 4, development fees, the city agrees to waive all fees and charges associated with the BEDC's development detailed in the agreement. Nothing contained herein is intended to, nor does it exempt, excuse, or waive any fee or charge assessed for any individual park property owner, developer, industry tenant, or other constructing projects in the park. So this applies to the EDC and the infrastructure that you put in or the developments that the EDC does while they own the property. After that, fees would apply to developers. From what I understand, and please someone correct me if I'm wrong, but the B3 codes apply to the industrial park under this agreement or any other agreement. But it is my understanding from working with the city staff that B3 codes are intended to be flexible. And so I want to make sure that's correct.
That was why we did a zoning of EC for employment center, and we made it specific, knowing that we didn't want to constrain the industrial park, and the industrial park was truly different than other parts of Bastrop. So when you go to the building Bastrop zoning allowances and you look at the different things like street setbacks and all that kind of stuff, you'll see on EC, you'll see a lot of blanks or to be determined, to be agreed, because it's really a matter of making sure there was flexibility of what do you want to do.
And so as the board is looking at the agreement, and I think that's what the Chair Nash mentioned earlier, is that to discuss where do we go from here, because the agreement, as I understand it, is still in effect. Do you renegotiate the agreement, try to maintain what the terms of the agreement as you move forward, and continue moving forward under the terms of the existing agreement and address infrastructure improvements as you have from project to project, which can slow your projects down because the infrastructure is not throughout the park through phases 2 through 6. So I think the question becomes, how do you get these projects or land shovel ready? And the more we can develop the infrastructure and loop it through the park, the faster it would be and easier, more efficient it would be when we're dealing with projects, because the infrastructure is already at least to the line of demarcation. So we can work with the city to zone the entire park EC, or employment center. EC is used for job creation centers and building forms that do not fit within the character of the other place types. So, or within character place types. You could, I guess, an option is to negotiate a new agreement, develop a master plan for phases 2 through 6 following the B3 grid and lot specifications, and I'm still not clear on that. I certainly am not an expert, and I will admit I'm not. B3 codes are very confusing to me in exactly how they fit in an industrial park, and I apologize if that's just me that it's frustrating for, but it has been frustrating for me to try and understand the B3 codes and how they fit in an industrial park. And then I think you can look at developing a master plan in which the infrastructure is installed throughout the park with consideration for the number of connectivity routes, and that would be determined or at least recommended by the city. And I think the mayor actually mentioned that to us, that we need to receive that information from the city so that when you're looking at pulling and looping the infrastructure, where does the city want ingress and egress, or where do they determine how many connectivity routes they want? And I think it would behoove us all if we could sit down and have that conversation with the city to know what they're looking at and how they want that connectivity. And so I think in doing so, we would come up with the best plan for pulling the infrastructure through the park, also for the connectivity. And when we reach those determinations and the infrastructure is throughout the park, I think you have the greatest opportunity for closing projects more efficiently, which then allows you job creation more efficiently, and it also adds development, land development, buildings, which will increase the property tax base, which benefits us all. So with that, that's the summary pretty much of the agreement. Do y'all have any questions? Bill, I know you've looked at it and we've had conversations in Kevin about this, or at least as the development committee. So if y'all have anything to add, please do.
I greatly appreciate the work done to bring us all up to speed, especially our newest member. She's actually gotten a lot more information than I got at the beginning, which was the first 6 months during COVID, which is a difficult time to join. But I think it's the first time that I've seen all this stuff put together in one packet for us to use, and it's going to be a good, valuable part for us to use and reference. I have looked through this. I know that we go through the B3 codes and so forth. It's kind of a chicken and egg situation. I know the city's willing to help us figure out what we want, but we need to know what we want in order to help them figure us out. And then, they can't help us if we don't know what we want to be. And I remember our last meeting, the BEDC group said, they need guidance. They need to know what we want to be when we grow up, although we've been growing up for a few decades and haven't, let's say, finished out the phases. The way I look at it is I think we need to stop trying and pull ourselves out of phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, phase 6, and just get the master plan set and not worry about the phases of the past. There's certain things I think we want to try and hold on to that we've got in that agreement that could make things easier for us, but at the same time, it's tough holding on to things when we don't have our own master plan of what we want. So a lot of it's going to come down to identifying a few key questions on what it is we want to do, and we want to develop it, I think, as a basis. It's an industrial park. It's not an entertainment center. It's not walking trails in a naturalist environment situation. It's an industrial park. And if we put our industrial hats on and you really look and study, we need to get the things in place that companies need. Whether it's a technology company, they're going to need certain infrastructure. If it's a manufacturing, they're going to need certain infrastructure, and we've got to get that to them. And I think what you said before, shovel-ready, even if you refer to the recent decisions by Ford, Ford chose their locations in Kentucky and Tennessee because they're shovel-ready sites. And, of course, Michigan's standing there going, well, what happened there? Well, Michigan shot themselves in the foot, but they also aren't shovel-ready. So I think shovel-ready has a way to convert things over quickly and convert ideas into actual taxable infrastructure, taxable buildings and jobs for the future. So I think the more we work ourselves towards that is going to be better. And I think the very first thing we really need to know is the back entrance. If we're not going to put a road in the back, then let's design without a road in the back. If we're going to put a road in the back, then put a road in the back.
Okay, would you define back?
The southwest, whatever we have that one lot. If we're going to hit that road, then we should choose that and do that. If we're not, then sell it. We already have a design to connect MLK to Industry Road, so we already have two ways out. So again, I think that's a key deciding point, because once that road is set, then the decision is set, then we can pick what's the best routing for the road. Things will then grow from that. But if we still continue with guessing at what's in the back or putting sweepy, windy roads through, we're not in the business of an industrial park. And I think we get to those decisions quickly, and the rest can help follow. And just my thoughts from where we're at so far.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's just about how do we maximize the amount of developable land, and yeah. So if that means, I agree with Bill. If we need to build a road that's south or an east exit, then let's do it, but let's put it in a place where we maximize it. Let's not orphan any property. Let's not make a property becomes so small or so oblong or, that it becomes unsellable. So that's, to me, that's what the planning idea is all about.
Question. We do not need a new development agreement in order to move forward with the rezoning to the industrial park as all EC?
That's
Or
correct.
do we need a new development agreement in order to get that P2 out of there?
What we need to do, and the city has already agreed, we can be the applicant, the city of Bastrop can be the applicant, or BEDC can be the applicant because they own the property. And it's important when you look at page 37, which shows the zoning, and it shows clearly the P2 zoning, and we can, it's not a big deal to get it over to EC, but the one step that we would need is a zoning concept scheme. And the fact of the matter is, the map on the back of the agreement that shows the connection to Pine Forest 6, a zoning concept scheme is not dedicated plat with built roadways. It's have some sort of a plan. And so if we can come up with a zoning concept scheme, BEDC can come up with a zoning concept scheme, and the wrinkle in all of this that is very, very much public information, Mocha Ventures is super interested in moving forward, and BEDC and council has said, yes, this is a good project. So we've publicly said that, we're committed to that, and we don't want to be in the critical path of that. So whether BEDC wants to be the applicant or the city of Bastrop, and to that matter, if BEDC says, well, we want to be working on something else, the city of Bastrop can come up with a zoning concept scheme. I mean, does not have to be a critical thing, but it does need to have some connectivity. And from Mr. Gossett and Mr. Plunkett's point, I'll just, because nothing can be completely easy, it's also public knowledge that Pine Forest 6 and Mauna Loa, and there are a number of lots along there that have different owners, shall we say. So it would make sense to pick the spot where BEDC owns a lot, and then if somebody wants a smaller piece or they want another connection and there's lots zoning concept schemes can change. That the whole idea of it in the code, it's called a concept scheme, is so that there's, as Mr. Gossett pointed out, there's some sort of a master plan that you start with, and then as we've seen since 1996, stuff changes because you don't really know who the applicants are going to be. And Mr. Gossett and I will always probably be on opposite sides of the sidewalks, and I think it's important to note that Mocha Ventures asked for bicycle lanes and sidewalks. So the idea of employment centers and what employment centers want is in 2021 is probably not what they wanted in 1996, and for all we know, in 2041 they want to know where your Uber hovercraft parking is. Who knows? But as far as the TIA, it's required in the agreement now, and if you come up with a concept scheme with connectivity, you kind of start losing the need for a TIA. That's the whole point of the grid system. They pointed out many times in their presentation, historically, this city was developed based on a grid system. It's good for traffic, it's good for road frontage. There's a reason that towns have done that over a period of time. So from my standpoint, because I feel an obligation to get that EC zoning in the rest of the industrial park, for me, that needs to be done to help the Mocha Ventures, and also so that we're never talking about P2 zoning in the future. Let's just one and done and fix the park, and for me, that's a big step towards getting towards a master plan. We have an industrial park that is all zoned the same.
it would be as simple as overlaying the industrial park as EC. Is it that straightforward?
Please
Okay.
don't say those words. Overlays are a different thing. If on slide 37, what we're talking about, if they go back to slide 37, we're taking the rural P2 part and we are making it a gray employment center. It is a zoning change, period. And in order to, and so it's that funky, I don't know, does that look like a face pointing the other way? It would be turning that gray to EC. That is a zoning change. It would have a very specific boundary, and one of the ways, the checklist to be able to do that is to come up with a zoning concept scheme. I need it to be EC because I'm going to put in this street that has connectivity for the industrial park. It's really not any more complicated than that. And the reason I know that is because the city manager and assistant city manager aren't making faces at me or running to the table. So I'm getting thumbs up. It's that simple.
And laying it all out now, would that make things easier with the toad situation? Or like we'd have to go
Kind
through
of a
those things
whole
one
different deal.
time rather than...
Yeah, it's a different deal, but the toad situation, whether it's P2 zoning or EC zoning, it still has its own process to go through.
And they're not,
Industrial toad instead of a rural toad.
yeah, yes.
But it's still a
They're
toad.
much
Yeah, but I
hardier.
don't think it's size or sound changes or location or existence, so.
So, if I may, really quick, you guys, I apologize. This map failed to make it into the presentation, but this is the one that I was wanting to show you guys. So the really light green that you see that goes all the way here, right? It's actually, throughout the county, it's 124,000 acres, but this is our small little part of the world. The red line defines that piece of property to the far east of our industrial park. That currently is, at this very moment, currently one lot. It's in the process of being subdivided, but that is currently one lot. So not all of that property is inside the Houston Toad Conservation Area. Now, with that being said, it is defined through city documents here and there that we've shared with you today as a conservation area. But those are two different things. One is the Houston toad, one is our defined, and I use that word lightly, our defined area of conservation, as well as an area that it doesn't typically show up as a phase in any of our maps. So we can, again, evaluate that, as the mayor stated, as now, right, the remainder of the industrial park, and defining it into a zoning concept scheme, so we then can incorporate it all as employment center, or evaluate it in different formats because of the topography, whatever the board so desires. And so you guys, sorry, it's taken me a minute to flip back, but I want to also, so as you can see, the face of the purple matches that conservation area, which is now currently deemed rural residential P2. So everybody can put lines together and understand what is what and why.
Is it my understanding that if the toad issue is not resolved, that any development that goes in, only 20% of that would be allowed as developable or developable, and the other, so in other words, if you had a 5-acre piece of land, they could only develop on 1 acre, And that's if the toad is not resolved
So
or gotten a clearance.
well, clearance or resolution is probably a hard definition in their world. They're live moving objects. There's no way to contain them. There's no way to move them. However, there are ways to live within them. So working with the county and defining, one, the size of your lot and what your plan is will help define your developable acreage. Typically is within the 20%. However, they do have good behavior credits. In other words, if you stay within and you create additional environments to support the toad, and I really wish Carrie was here, but I'm trying to remember everything she said, but they literally, yeah, I think it goes up to 30%. And so in a phased out development, that can be extremely beneficial as long as you're supporting the habitat of the toad, using the land to encourage, right, encourage their existence, not necessarily breeding or anything like that. They've actually tried to kind of go away from, they used to require people to put ponds on their property, and now they're not requiring that because they've got too many and they're spreading out too far. So they're harder to study and understand. But yes, you start out with 20%, you have the option to go on good behavior credits to increase the developable property.
I'm assuming retention ponds don't count.
So they do in regards to environmental, right? That's where they're attracted to because there's water and soil and trees. But it depends on how you use that retention pond, and is it a true retention pond or is it a detention pond, right? Does it hold water or does it hold and release water? And so, again, it's all in. So what you could do is if you have something like, you know, some of the lower part of the park does have some water sources on it. You could take that and you could create it into more of a sustainable environment for the toad to encourage them to stay within that area. If that makes sense. I'm not a toad expert. I just want to reiterate that.
Madam Chair, before we go to the toad, can we maybe as a board make a decision on it? Does BEDC want to be the applicant for the zoning change, or do you want the city of Bastrop to be the applicant for the zoning change?
Open for discussion. I want the fastest way possible. I want it to be a no-nonsense, let's get it done, move forward. But it needs to cover exactly what we've talked about.
Not really.
In my opinion, it needs to be BEDC. It's our land. It's what we're supposed to do. We need to have the master plan. We need to have the roads. Either way, we have to develop the plan that we want. If we turn around and just have the city develop what they want, or it's just going to be what they do, as opposed to what we want the BEDC to do. I'm not saying that that's conflictive. It's just going to be something else, and then either we're going to have to undo it if we have a different opinion, or if we don't get our plan put together. I would rather have the BEDC get our plan together and then submit that and get it done. It's just my opinion. Otherwise, we're just letting someone else do it at this point, because it takes requirements and it's deliverables, and then it won't be long before we don't have the deliverables because we're back to we don't really have a plan. So I think it just falls under our realm of getting it done.
Is there a reason we should do it? I mean, it is, I agree with Bill, it seems like it is our job, it's our purpose, so unless there's a reason that we should do it.
I don't think there's a reason for it to be either one. I just want to have clarity of who owns getting it rezoned and knowing that the zoning concept scheme has to be completed. So we need some actions to get that puppy drawn up, because I don't want Mocha Ventures to say, hey, where are we on this? And it's, well, we're scheduling another workshop to talk about a zoning concept scheme. So the answer of what is absolutely fastest, for me, what's absolutely fastest is using this map that shows a connection to to Pine Forest 6. I was going to call it Lost Forest Pines. I mean, it just, all those words together. But showing a connection to Pine Forest 6, it's a zoning concept scheme, and let's let the zoning process be taking place. I just don't want it to linger in committee, I get, and on either side. To Mr. Gossett's point, there's deliverables. It's going to have to go to planning and zoning. It's going to have to be heard by council. All of it, I don't expect there to be any issues, but none of that can take place till somebody has the ownership of being the applicant and fills out the paperwork. There's not fees involved, whether it's the city or BEDC. It's not about cutting checks or anything else. It's about getting off of square one. And that, my goal is to get us off of square one.
So if we're the applicant, we're more in the driver's seat, pushing it forward. I like that.
Madam Chair, how quickly do you want to get everybody together again?
What can we get done today? I think we're here till noon. It's only 10:30.
An hour and a half.
We might be able just to outline it and get it done before we walk out the door. That would be terrific. Does anybody want to take a quick break before we tackle it? Let's do it. 10 minutes max, 5 minutes if everybody shows back up. Okay, we're going to reconvene at 10:39 or so. Come back in and start talking about the zoning concept plan so that we can knock that out and get moving on. Thanks. On that. What we have is on the screen, as well as in front of us on a map, is a hand drawing provided by the city that we want to talk through, and then certainly match that up with any cleanup that we want to do on it, or up against any requirements that we have to have.
So,
just to
Madam
make sure
Chair,
we're all on the same page.
Exactly. So at our last board meeting, I had said it would be helpful if the city would give some sort of an idea of what they would be looking for in a zoning concept scheme, so we weren't playing find the needle in the haystack. So this was done by the assistant city manager, and again, it's sideways, but I gave everybody a copy of it so you can orient it more towards how you're used to looking at it. And this meets the requirements of a zoning concept scheme. You will see that it is extremely close to the back page, the last map that's shown on the first amended development agreement document that you got. If you just completely turn it over on the very last page on the back side of it, you'll see that there is a connection to the east and a connection to the south. This document that was hand-drawn was the idea of this is what the city of Bastrop would be looking for: a connection to the east and a connection to the south. Again, it's a concept scheme. The reason it was submitted hand-drawn was there was really no point in doing it all up if Mr. Gossett was going to say that isn't anything close to what I want, and we want to do something completely. It was the idea of here's a layout of what could be, what would be approved. It is really important to note. And if the way that you're looking at it from on this is, let's just say, the most southern boundary of Mocha, if i- if you look at the building Bastrop, the blocks, the 720 blocks is one of the foundations that building Bastrop is built on. Employment centers and the discussion of people are looking for larger lots kind of flies in the face of the 720 may not work. So this doesn't show the kind of grids that you see outside of industrial parks, and the flexibility of the code allows the EC code can say we're not going to require the 720 blocks, which means that this concept scheme would be compliant to the EC zoning and would be therefore be compliant, and it is a planning zoning concept scheme that could be the basis of changing the P2 zoning to EC zoning in all of the industrial park, and from then on, we would only know, all we would be talking about is EC zoning.
How long would you anticipate that process to take?
It has to go to planning and zoning that meets once a month, and they'll meet at the end of October, and then it has to go to city council. So it'd be the early November city council meeting. But, Trey just held up two fingers. It may require, because it's a zoning change, that it comes to council 2 times, and council only meets in November 1 time. So it would be 1 time in November and then the first meeting in December. And there's a public hearing required. I think planning and zoning would hold the public hearing. Planning and zoning would hold 1 public hearing. Mr. Hoffman, why don't you just come to the microphone so I don't start lying. I just vote when they put it on the agenda. Get on a mic so they can.
Just a quick comment about
You'll have to turn it on.
Pull the button torch.
There you go.
just a quick comment about the schedule, Mayor, and that was all perfect, except for how quickly we could get to P&Z, probably not the October meeting.
Because we have to send out notifications for the surrounding area.
And the zoning concept scheme would also require a drainage assessment. We don't think that's a giant big deal, but that would take a little bit of doing. We would use the contracted city engineer for that. But the zoning concept scheme does require a drainage assessment and the road layout. So
Okay.
we do think we could, we don't think this is critical path to the ultimate development of the MoCA site or the balance of the industrial park. And everything you just said about process and schedule in the sequence of events is correct.
Is the public hearing required at P&Z
Yeah,
and
there's-
council, or just P&Z?
There's public hearings required for both.
Okay.
And since it's zoning and that's an ordinance, it would require 2 readings ultimately of the city council. And if given the opportunity, we could come up with a more precise, reasonable schedule. But yeah, but those are the component parts.
Okay, but we got to have the roads laid out before somebody can do a drainage assessment.
That's right.
So outside of a alternate path, it's 90 days, is that correct, Trey? Okay.
Right.
Just wanted the board to actually hear those numbers.
So I guess I have 2 questions so far. If we get this approved, then we're free to later subdivide these tracks?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely,
Then
because it's
other-
not a plat, it's just a,
Okay, but then we theoretically are able to start building the roads and everything. Okay.
the main thing that, if the zoning concept scheme submitted, the drainage that matches that, and it gets made into EC zoning, then it's all zoned EC, and then through the platting process, you finalize where the roads are going to be, and you can do one big lot, or you can do smaller lots and people buy several lots, or you can do one big lot and then subdivide it.
Okay, so that doesn't have to be decided today.
Don't have to
Where
decide
are
on
the
this.
sticking points going to be with planning and zoning? I would assume coming into the residential areas, probably?
Well, planning and zoning is 9 independent citizens, so I would not predict exactly what their concerns would be. But the fact that this is, whether you go with the last page of the existing development agreement, or if you go with the drawing that you have before you, I would fully expect there to be a discussion about the connectivity, but I also know that staff will be coming to planning and zoning with its staff recommended because of the connectivity requirement. And we all know, and we can anticipate that folks would say, but I don't want the industrial park connected to my subdivision. And the fact of the matter is particularly big trucks that are coming to the industrial park, they aren't going through the subdivision. And more likely, the traffic that's going to be on this road is people who want to get out to the light at 71 would be cutting through.
Yeah, it's going to create a shortcut for them.
And that shortcut, quite frankly, during the complex fire,
Yeah.
could have made a huge difference.
Sure.
So that's why connectivity exists, so that traffic can flow.
Just kind of working through and studying this, for the city, is it required to have a roadway exit to the east?
Yeah, so you asked me a couple of questions there, I think.
Yeah, there's a roadway.
What's currently required is the 720 grid. What I think our staff recommendation would be this minimal connectivity.
Okay, so and again, this is a concept. Ours drawn before was a concept, everything's concept. So now, instead of conceptual, I'm going to go down to specifics. Is a roadway going to the east and access to the east required?
So I'll say that one more time. You would have 720 grid requirement. You'd have multiple. You'd have 6 to 8 more connections that would be required. This is what you take to council for approval with the staff recommendation. Required if it's approved by city council? Absolutely.
Okay, so let me help. You're answering the question, is it required to have 1 or 6? He's asking you, can it be 0? And the answer is no. It's got to have at least 1 connection, or it's not going to get staff recommendation.
Correct. Council can approve whatever they like.
Okay, then let me rephrase it again until we get to what I want to understand. The city is recommending that we have at least 1 east access.
Correct.
Okay. The city is also desiring to have 1 south access.
If possible, yeah.
That's correct.
Well, no, it's either is or isn't, not a possible.
Yes, this is the preferred access, what you see here, south and east.
For the zoning
At
concept
that-
scheme to get a staff recommended approval to council, it will have a minimum of 1 connection to the east and the minimum of 1 connection to the south. The reason Mr. Job isn't definitively telling you, by God, this is required, is because Mr. Job works for the city manager, who works for 5 council members, and 3 votes can override something.
Understood.
And just, again, part of the zoning concept scheme is about a 30% high-level drainage study. And what that does is it'll help you locate those roads. They may absolutely not be in that pattern because they can't be, because there's a drainage issue that won't allow it to happen, or some kind of geographically sensitive reason. But you're right, a connection to the south and east is preferred.
Is preferred.
And the
Exact
reason that he
locations.
moved, like if you, this concept scheme is shown at the top of the Blue Bonnet substation. We're trying to match with that, knowing that that's a lot line. That's where BEDC bought the lot.
Okay.
So it's not just randomly they picked that east connection. There's some things driving that east connection.
And the choice of that lot for the south connection, is there also a basis for that choice of that lot?
There's just 3 blank lots, empty lots sitting next to each other.
Okay.
They're vacant.
Okay. So under the scheme at this point, you would have 2 north accesses, 1 east access, and 1 south access.
Yeah, but I honestly, with the 71, that I have to get my directions
MLK
straight. That MLK
access isn't
access is
much.
not really an access.
Oh, I'm gonna get there, too.
Because it goes to the 71.
Right, I'm gonna get there too.
Okay.
Because what I'm looking at is, I'm asking the questions related to being in the industrial estate. So if I'm a member sitting in the industrial estate, then there's
Industrial
or
park,
industrial
state
park.
sounds kind of weird
Yeah,
these
it's
days.
Upscale. But if you're inside, you would have 4 accesses out of this final plan. You had 1 to the south, 1 to the east, and 2 to the north to get out.
No. Because if I'm an industrial person and I have big trucks, I can go north to 71.
I'm getting there. Right now, I'm just trying to get accesses. Then I'm going to get into discussions of what's on those accesses.
Okay.
And how are they, and how are they designed? Because accesses can be limited, it can be restricted, or they can be free and open. And I want to get to that point, because that's going to be the basis of how you design. So again, going back, you got 2 roads to the north, 2 accesses to the north, 1 access to the south, and 1 access to the east. No requirement, but that doesn't go anywhere. South Street doesn't exit. It dies in the middle of a cemetery out there. Does it? Does this connect anywhere?
To the east, no, sir.
No,
It does not.
it
goes
does
to
not.
54 Student 6, which currently does not have a roadway to it.
There's no roads out there.
Okay.
So that's why I'm, again, just getting everybody on the same page. We got 2 roads to the north, we got 1 road to the south, and 1 road to the east. No roads required to the west, no requirements to cross the railroad tracks. Right?
Correct.
So we're good there.
Because you know about crossing railroad tracks.
I know all about crossing
Okay.
railroad tracks. I've done it, and designed them, and built the railroads. Okay, so that's the access to the proposal. Now, the next part is, what are these accesses? So accesses can be breakaway gates. When the fires happen and you got to get up, you actually literally drive through the gate, and the gate opens. So out of this proposal, Jackson Street is a full access egress and entrance and exit gate.
Ingress and
Ingress and egress.
Those are the words you're searching for.
So, and that's where you want most of the traffic
Bingo.
to go. We've already had the discussions about MLK and Technology Drive. We said that that's going to be developed. That's a secondary access, but not restricted. There may be some signage that says don't go, no trucks this way, but again, cars would still be able to go back and forth through that way.
Right, and we talked about from a local standpoint, although exactly to your point, if you're a big truck, you're going to be coming in on Jackson, but with what Deep in the Heart is doing with the Art Institute, there can be some local traffic that'll be utilizing that access point.
Understood. But push come to shove, you got a complete disruption on Jackson. Trucks would still be able to get out and be able to come through this way as required. So again, what we're looking at is MLK Technology Drive is a secondary access with cars allowed, trucks by exception.
Yep.
In general. Okay. So then, to get an understanding of the south exit, you know, the way this is drawn, it's going to be a free access. But conceptually, is it going to be cars? Is it going to be trucks? You know, from my point of view, that's not a real good access point. And what does the city envision the traffic with this proposal of being? Residential traffic?
So I don't believe you've actually decided on an ultimate user today. I've heard you talk about industrial users and large lots. Previously, since we're talking about history, I haven't seen anything over 4 to 7 lots. 4 to 7 acres, sorry, for each lot. You could absolutely just sell to one large user, and that's when, if that's your goal, that's the concept that you want to change, then we talk about access. But
I was
all
just
that
talking
happens,
about the whole industrial estate.
sure, but
So
all
we
that
open
happens
a-
is you design it and plan that out at your planning stage. Right? We're talking now your concept, just to have something.
But it is a concept, and that's why I'm not picking 4 acres or 40 acres. All I'm saying is an access. What's the envisioned traffic in that access? So it could be trucks, it could be commercial back to this area, although it's less likely. More likely, it's going to be cars
But how do you restrict it to only cars, for one? And secondary to that is how do you prevent it from being a shortcut shot for all the, there's hundreds of lots down here, and this is the most direct route to Highway 71 and Buc-ee's and QT.
Sure.
So essentially, by opening up that south route, you have converted the industrial park to a residential cut-through. And so I don't believe as a BEDC that we want a primary residential cut-through being designed through the middle of the industrial estate. So if this is a proposal, how, from a city's point of view, how would you manage the entry and exit here to prevent this from being a residential cut-through through QT?
I think if you wanted to limit the truck traffic there, you would make that no large trucks, right? They could do that by ordinance. We could put up signage. You could narrow the roadway, make it less comfortable.
Right.
But I understand your question, but I'm not sure the roadways are to be used for any kind of traffic, correct?
Not necessarily, not if it's on our land. So then it comes back to the discussion of you've designed, essentially you've created an entire different environment in there. How do you restrict, how do you manage that so this does not become Chestnut?
Right. And what I'm telling you is I have the policy direction, not, it's supposed to be multiple modes of transportation. That is the goal. That's what you see here. If we want to restrict it based on use, that's not the policy direction that I've ever received. So we would just have to do that at the time of platting.
So, again, we're talking about policy direction, so one of the things is you could say along this line that you want the south to be emergency access only, and then you find out whether or not council approves that. But you could very much say, we understand the connectivity, we understand the importance of the connectivity, but we want to limit this to emergency access only on the south. That's absolutely, that's kind of part of the point of discussing that.
And if that is the proposal, then we would write that into the original layout and say this would be a busaway gate that would allow, or what they call
breakaway
gate, breakaway, that would allow that fire could come in that way, or if someone crisis, you could come out that way.
And then you see absolutely, and the reason Mr. Job's being very careful and choosing his words carefully is because we as the BEDC board own the property and can put on our zoning concept scheme what we think is absolutely the best for the zoning concept scheme. It's ultimately approved by council.
Understood. The key is that, unfortunately, we're not at liberty to put ourselves in a room and hash this out like you would do in a private industry, where you literally have a working group sitting together, you lock the door, 6 hours later everybody walks out, they've got their notes, the priorities, and you pretty much hold hands. Not consensus, not unanimous, but you have a consensus of what you do. And since we were not in the room when you guys did it, we're trying to get an understanding of what was the thinking from the city's point of view when they proposed this, because there's good ideas that we need to understand for both how we use it and how it'd be used in the forward. So, understood.
I don't think there was a big meeting. I think it was
I don't know. I'm just saying
this.
Just said I wasn't in the room with who was there, so that's why I'm trying to get that thought through.
Yep, happy to answer any questions.
The second part is the east entrance, the conceptualization for the east entrance.
The one further south?
The one coming out on Mauna Loa.
The one going through the lot that the BEDC purchased?
The BEDC lot that exists. And so that, based on the road of Mauna Loa and so forth, is that usable for truck traffic?
It absolutely could be.
So tractor trailers could come out, currently, if we built that, we could come out and hit Mauna Loa and hit, I don't know what this other road.
Well, those roads would have to be built, but yes, those roads aren't there.
I've driven tractor trailers a
Those roads
long
aren't
time
built
ago.
Okay, I think we need to
There's
clarify
no
that
way you'd
statement.
want to go anywhere but up to
Let's let
71.
Jeff finish his comment. We got
I'm just
three
saying
people.
anyone driving a truck would not want to drive through it.
They would not choose
You're gonna go to
Mauna Loa.
71, and they're all going to be coming and going from there.
Understood. The only beauty of the design I liked is it came straight out into another straightaway.
Yeah.
And that means, and I don't know the
I
rest
don't
of the
know where it
drawing,
goes.
but you would be able to take a truck straight out, hit that road, and then hopefully you would have gentler turns than a,
And the roads you see in 6 are not built, so,
not yet.
not yet, correct.
But if we made that and designed that as a truck access, then we would be able to come back and say, from a city's point of view, we'd like the city to be considering these to be truck accessible roads too, and have a second truck access, because now there's another entrance back on 71 over by Tahitian.
Right.
That would bring you out. So in the long-term plan, if that's a secondary truck access to get it off of this mess right here, the 95, 21, 71, to create a different alternative truck route, then that would be in support of that.
Sure.
Does the city have plans to develop additional truck routes in this area of?
So I think that's what I was wanting to clarify is please keep in mind that the black line that is around our property, that is the city limits. Everything outside of that belongs to the county.
Got it. So
will
the question's
city-
to the county.
Correct.
Okay.
No, yeah.
Understood. The point is just understanding what we want to do. So now, if we open up the east access will not be a truck access. It would become a car or small vehicle access only potential.
Could be. Again, the road's designed to handle a certain gross vehicle weight. So when you're defining truck traffic and not, all the roads should be designed to hold truck traffic. Whether it's restricted by city council is the question.
From a
And you
pavement
could-
design, it's a policy on what
Correct.
you allow to be on the road. It's
Yes.
a different question to say, can the road handle
Correct.
Right.
a weight?
But an emergency exit in design does not have the same design criteria as a tractor trailer, two-way, full industrial pathway design.
The main standard is that gross vehicle weight to handle a fire truck.
Correct.
Right.
But not side-by-side fire trucks back and forth with all the curbing and all the other things. It's truly an emergency exit route.
Yeah, it could be.
And then would be have a different design standard that we would request and say, we don't see this as building Jackson Street over to here because you don't want tractor trailers and everything coming out here. So part of the questioning and understanding is what is it that we would ask the BEDC to design? And so in this case, this routing becomes emergency, theoretically, if we reach that point. And this one would be car traffic principally, and whether that's open all the time or it's also an emergency exit is up for us to decide, or at least to
Exactly.
propose.
Exactly.
If we make it a car access, then essentially, even though this stuff is not here, you see the picture of what that is. That's thousands of people over here getting a direct pathway out to Highway 95.
They also could be employees of companies that
Exactly.
relocate here, and they wouldn't like to have to go all the way out to Lover's Lane and back
Yep.
around.
Which
It
might
can-
make that a desirable employment center.
Can be. But it also makes it essentially a primary thoroughfare of access to the main highway. So now all of a sudden, instead of the industrial estate, you've really opened this up to all of the residential traffic driving through the industrial estate. Unless we do signage or we use something else that says entrance only by people who have business or work related to the industrial park. Don't know if you ever reach that point. The fear of the design is that all of a sudden the industrial park becomes Chestnut Street. And that is going to be a huge issue on an industrial park. So, and again, in conclusion at this point, there's a roadway to the east desired, a roadway to the south desired for access, primarily for emergency.
Connectivity, correct.
I'm not sure what the word connectivity means.
Connecting.
I understand. I said for emergency, the roads are there. If connecting means all open access and driving everybody through it, that's a
Oh, no,
different concept.
it can still be emergency.
Okay,
But the
understood.
requirement is the connectivity. Whether the policy of how limited that is different, but the requirement itself is the connectivity.
Okay. All right. And trucks primarily through Jackson Street. Secondary, if you had trucks or truck problem or something on Jackson Street, secondary truck would be
MLK.
out through MLK. Okay. And then emergency exit potential to the south, and then some type of restricted access to the east. Okay. So that helps us understand why and what, because if we don't have that discussion, then it's assumed trucks are going everywhere, or trucks are going nowhere. I mean, we have to understand what it is that we're laying out. So, okay.
So I have a question for you. Okay. The individuals who we will be employing for these businesses in this industrial park will be coming likely from these neighborhoods. If they don't have an easy way to get to their employers, it's going to be a problem. It's going to be a big problem because I don't want to get on 71 to get to something that is in my backyard. That's going to be a major frustration point, and I will not accept employment for somebody like that. So what can we do to facilitate the ability for, again, we're looking for local people to provide the individuals to populate these jobs so that they can get to their employer easily without the hardship of 71 and 21 and 95. So how are we going to facilitate that?
That's an excellent question as it relates to how we lay it out. Likewise, if it is so easy to get through that you see that this becomes the #1 thoroughfare for thousands of people, the industrial park becomes non-existent. Because nobody would build an industrial estate if you have to sit for 40 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever to get out of here, because the single traffic light runs for about a minute and a half.
And that's what your TIA requirement can help you figure out as we go forward.
Right.
Right, today, again, this is just for connectivity, and my understanding was you really wanted large lots. I've kind of calculated some approximate acreage on there, but again, that all comes with the TIA.
And large lots is not in discussion right now. That's a separate discussion, whether we do a lot of small lots and prepare them or large lots. It's really just about the traffic flow and getting the peak.
Well, but that was part of the discussion,
I know.
was wanting the large lots. And Jen, you are bringing up an excellent point, and I just want to, I mean, I know this is super obvious, but realize, to Jen's point, if you lived in Pine Forest 6, and you didn't have the connectivity, not only would you have to go to 71, you'd have to go across 71, back around, back down, like it's not even easy to get. You couldn't run home for lunch because you would be doing a major loop-de-loop.
As they do today.
So I have another question, and this is my ignorance, okay? So with that in mind, most individuals try to get to their employers in a set time frame, let's say 6 a.m. to 9 a.m., that kind of thing. Do we have the ability to limit access based on time frame? So most deliveries to like tech tend to happen out of normal business hours. They happen in the mornings or they happen at night. Is there an ability to facilitate that kind of change?
You can. The more restrictions you put on an industrial park for delivery times and shipping times means you're no longer an industrial park. You're more of a residential area, and it's a detriment to the design of industrial. Industrial doesn't want to have someone else program their delivery times.
Right.
But it's something that can be worked with. But if that's the case, those are the type of covenants or restrictions we want to put in the contracts of the industrial estate now, and say now we're going to restrict that there can be no industrial delivery from, let's say, 3 p.m. until 7 p.m. or from nothing in the morning, whatever that comes up with.
Right.
Because you really don't want that to be a restriction on the industries.
So here's a question for you. Dell, I'll use them as an example. You'll always notice the fact that the the transportation trucks that go for their manufacturing are only set for a specific time frame. Same thing happens in the same area with UPS. They actually structure their delivery trucks around certain traffic flow patterns, okay? Again, that would be something for consideration as well. I understand and hear what you're saying related to, you know, we're making it less advantageous for an industrial area, but also recognizing the fact that we're trying to employ local constituents.
And those restrictions, I would be saying, don't put the restrictions in the bylaws now and wait and see if there's a problem. And then if there is a problem, then you can fix that problem. Because if I was, to your point, if I was one of the thousands of people that you see driving north on Jackson and I'm waiting in line 40 minutes, it's not a cut through anymore and I'm not going that way anymore. But so some of it, it's like the long line in the grocery store, and don't get behind me because I always pick the wrong line, but if, you know, when you have options, people fan out to those options. So, and when something becomes a problem, at that point, BEDC could say, hey, we have UPS has built a station and they want to have restricted hours, and can we add those restrictions? And council could certainly evaluate that policy change when and if it was required. But and BDC can do what they want, and you know, we can see how the vote goes or whatever. But to your point, I wouldn't add restrictions that may not be needed if that makes someone say, well, I don't want to go there because I have restricted trucks. But if you only have one place that has trucks, that's different than if every single one of them have trucks that are all coming at exactly the same time.
I agree. And I have to say, if you know, you're envisioning a line of 18-wheelers coming and going here, if I lived over here in Mauna Loa, I'd use that once or twice for a cut through and go, the heck with this, I gotta sit behind 8 trucks. You know, how long does it take them to get through a light?
And if you worked there, you'd be pretty happy. If you lived in Pine Forest and you worked in the industrial park.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, another thing too is, I mean, we're not discussing the design of the road, even the width of the road, or really even specifically where the road is going to connect up with anything else. It's just an idea of this is where connectivity could generally take place. And when the time comes to actually build stuff, then we can talk about and have a much clearer idea of what needs we would have for restrictions and things like that.
I think you're right, but at the same time, it's our responsibility to come up with a master plan of what we expect it to be. I would hate to have gone into the city proposing that we got full tractor trailer lines going everywhere and going into the city with our proposal, but really going into a proposal that says, if we do this, and again, I'm just taking notes. I mean, as a BEDC, we have to decide, but if we go in and say, we expect this south exit to be an emergency exit only, we expect this east exit or access to be principally automobiles only. Again, it helps us understand how we expect it, because if you come back later and you've got a major tractor trailer industrial in here, do we have the same guidance? I just want to get us to the point that we actually know what we want to be when we grow up. Access-wise, understood. Designing the road, understood. But we still have to tell people later on what we expect that to be. And I think if we can reach that point now, I think we're better prepared for the work.
So just again, in that zoning concept scheme, if you don't do that, you can define it. You may not get a large user. You may continue to get smaller users, and you're making it less flexible if you do put that restriction in there. I'm just bringing it up.
And, you know, the whole discussion about smaller or larger lots, I think is a separate discussion for the BEDC, whether small lots are excellent incubators and medium size. Large lots, you're competing with everybody else in the whole region that's got big ranches and big lots.
But it does define your traffic.
But it can define the traffic. You know, even a big unit can have a lot of trucks, and a big unit can have few trucks. I mean, we take a look at an operation like Mocha.
No trucks.
No trucks with UPS deliveries and such. So, I mean, that's where that.
And that brings me back to why the TIA will establish what that use needs to be at the time for the street access.
Yeah.
Let's not
We
forget.
can do it then, is what I'm saying.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
We have control over who we want to come in here going forward. If somebody, like
Right.
probably a ridiculous example, but, you know, if FedEx or UPS came along and said, well, we need 80 acres and, you know, as a distribution point, that's going to be trucks coming and going all day long.
Right.
We can say, maybe not.
Yeah. I think my number one concern is to make sure we don't become a cut-through. Because if you become a cut-through in the middle of an industrial park, that is a problem for an industrial park, all around the world.
We're growing here, though. It's happening. I live, you
No,
know,
no,
down
I
in
just mean.
Farm Street's become a cut-through to get to 95 to go to Buc-ee's or
Right.
71.
But Farm Street's not an
It is.
industrial park.
No.
That's my point, is that when you sell and you market and you develop an industrial park, there's certain expectations of that as a industry buyer. And then to find out you're locked because of a local cut-through, you've got to know that ahead of time and try and minimize that as best you can.
I would just like to remind you that the E and the EC is employment center, and that a lot of those employees drive cars. And so there may be a certain amount of traffic through the industrial park that is people going to work. So,
Understood?
Might ease traffic in other areas.
Yeah. If that's what we want to be as a BEDC industrial park, as to be the traffic easement area, then we can, it can be, but the
I'm just inviting you to the other extreme.
I'm
Not
there.
every car that's in the industrial park is cutting through. There could also be, hopefully, the whole point of this is to be an employment center, and there
Correct.
will be a number of cars that are employees and possibly for the foundry, students at well, I was going to say gummy bears because that's the way it was shown on the map, but there will be, we are already inviting students, we're inviting employees, they'll have custodians, they'll have people that are bringing other services, and not all of those people will be in a large truck.
No, I know that.
Okay.
I very much know that. I mean, I've worked in industry all over the world.
Okay.
In fact, in other countries, excellent organizations actually have buses. In fact, excellent cities and so forth actually have public transportation that bring hundreds of workers into the industrial estates, because most of the people can't afford cars in Thailand and Mexico and some of the other places. So they actually promote that in terms of public transportation, and they actually bring those in to the industrial estate on normal routes. I mean, that's the other extreme of how to support people working, coming to work without having hundreds of cars. But I realize we're going to have lots of cars of employees here because we don't have extensive public transportation in the U.S. or train systems in the U.S. like you do in other countries around the world. So you're already going to fill this, as we fill this land out, you're going to fill it with all the workers coming. There's already requirements for the buildings or the landowners to have parking for their vehicles on site, because we're not going to be doing street parking. I hope we don't get to street parking, although I've seen street parking happen in industrial estates because there wasn't planning for correct parking by the landowners themselves. But if you added that parking and someone happens to start street parking, unfortunately, and then you have drive-throughs, you really are creating a non-industrial environment for an industrial park, that's all. So, I mean, I've seen it happen, I've seen it develop, and it can go many different ways. So, Madam Chair, I think I'm good with my understanding of accesses and a better understanding what the city was thinking, in the proposal, which was good to see, and appreciate the work you guys did to give it to us.
So I think really as a group, we need to decide, first of all, on the zoning concept plan. We know now that we have to have a south and we have to have an east. Do we want to incorporate in those access points any restrictions as we present it in our zoning concept plan, or do we feel as if we can move forward in order to get the zoning of the industrial park into EC and address the more particulars about each one of those access points, or even the location of those after we get there. So I'll just open that up.
It's likely they'll come back with whatever we propose with changes or suggestions, correct? For things they don't like, or will it just reject it?
It's half six a dozen, whatever that is, or six half a dozen, or whatever that is.
There's a 6 involved.
They'll have questions. They'll bounce it around. We'll have someone there that can answer those questions as they come up and address them. But I think they'll probably come up with a decision before they would come back to us.
Well, I would lean towards less restrictions on a proposal, than more.
Yeah, to me, there's no reason to put restrictions in until you start to need them, or until you start to build it. This is just a scheme concept, so any restrictions we put in now would only be limiting, options later. So
I think we're all kind of agreed on the south being an emergency only. So, that seems to make sense.
I actually appreciate Bill going on a deep dive on this, because these are all things we do have to consider, and we need to be proactive and aware of and mitigate those, not after the fact necessarily, but at least as we are moving forward and keeping a close eye on all of these issues. My concern is getting the P2 zoning back to EC. That is really the push here. I'm sorry P2 is even in there. And so I think moving forward to get the P2 out is the most important.
Well, but Mr. Gossett has said a number of times, we got to decide what we're going to be when we grow up, and this concept scheme is a first step to that. So the closer we get to a master plan, the better off we're going to be, because it's been since 2013, really, we should have been working on it and finalizing it. So yay, well, at least we're doing it now.
With that said, we will also have to have the 30% high-level drainage study done. And what are the processes, staff, that we move that forward? Is that something the city does with their engineering? Is this someone we bring in independently? What's the next step there?
So we've already been looking at that, and again, depending on layouts and formats and all of those good things would determine where those additional regional detention ponds fall. I will flip back really quick and kind of show you guys. Come on.
I think her question is, who's actually going to do the drainage study?
So if you recall, the EDC paid for a drainage study for Pine Forest Unit 6 that also incorporated some of the industrial park for the impact to the south of us, which was part of Tahitian Village. The county has also done some drainage studies, of which I have access to as well. So that will all go to our engineer to evaluate all of that. We also own a drainage, I say own, we manage a drainage channel, and I wish it was actually on this, but it kind of comes about right here and then wraps right at the back of these properties right here, and then filters into a channel that runs along UP. That is definitely something we need to address and incorporate into our long-term plans for the southern part of the park to help mitigate any additional flooding as we develop and change. That will be incorporated into those plans as well.
Who is
So our engineer, I think I said that, whoever.
Who is our engineer?
So it would be Doucette is who we've been working with to date, but of course, if you guys want to use someone else, we can do that.
Okay, so what I'm really getting down to is when we go out of workshop, we're going to need votes.
Okay.
We're going to need to vote on the schematic, and we're going to need to vote on moving forward with a contract with an engineering firm. So I'm just outlining what it is we're going to need to vote on as we come out of that. That's nice to know we have somebody. It's nice to know that we already have engineering plans from the county as well as previous studies, and that can all go into the final that we need to get done. Do you have any idea what a timeline would look like to pull that all together?
To pull a schematic together?
To
or-
pull together the drainage plan to submit for the zoning concept plan?
I do not know an exact timeline, but I know that he is prepared to start working when we tell him to go.
And I'm asking because I don't know, is who did the Pine Forest 6 drainage study for the EDC? Was that Bevco or was that Doucette?
No, I believe Half and Associates is
Half?
the person who did that drainage study.
Okay.
That
And
sounds right.
And the reason I'm bringing that up is sometimes it's cheaper and faster if you're using the engineering company that did the first study because they already have the information. So that's just something to consider. And I know Half has done a lot of drainage work for the city. I don't know, do you know who the engineer was for the county? Was it Half or was
I do not, but I think it was Half, but I can verify that.
I would suggest that sometimes it's easier if you use people who already have a lot of the data and are already familiar with the area.
And generally, you don't end up with surprises, because if you end up with a whole surprise, then it's on them from the last one, so. There's another, I don't know how, in order to do the drainage study, you pretty much have to have the roads laid out in general. I mean, just roughly where you're gonna put them. Is that kind of true?
Yeah, in the development manual, it requires a certain level of geotechnical, right, boring, get some soils, and then start your road grid, so you understand where everything's gonna be, and a limited impervious cover.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Because one of the things that, you know, again, you brought up one of the points about that drainage canal going through. And, you know, what I would propose based on that is, and again, I don't know who can see what, but
Which one
get
do you
away,
have?
get away from the circles and the curves and all of that, and really get into, from this point, you described a drainage line that comes down, and essentially trying to look at how you can parallel the drainage line, at least put the road along that drainage line to maximize parallel to it to the side, because otherwise you're going to really end up with destroying value of the property, because you're going to have a drainage through the middle of someone's property. That's one. The other is, if this is truly an emergency exit, if that's our concept, it doesn't need to be quite integral. So you'd have emergency exit on one side, you'd have a car / third level truck exit. If you had a complete block down on the north side, trucks could get out here theoretically if anything got built, and then you would see an evacuation or an empty going this way, and you'd see the west side coming out through the south.
I think this one does parallel the drainage.
Yeah, but it parallels it, but can we put it on the drainage? Right next to the drainage, let the drainage and the road be one and the same. So I do want to take a look at those and say what can be done in that concept.
So
You're talking about moving this road over to here?
Yeah, depending on where it fits and what comes in, but essentially get away from the circle concepts and really get into the grid, because one of the things that happens, very few industrial estates design on curves. Most industrial buildings are built on 90-degree angles, although there's many angles in laws of physics.
90's a good
90 is the only one that most people pull out. So you're really looking at square blocks, and anything that's not square is actually inefficient.
And it just turns out that square is even that more compliant to the B3 code.
Right.
Funny how blocks work out. Yeah.
So again, I'd like to take a look at, as we lay those roads out the first time, that we really take a look at this makes sense going forward.
So a couple of things really quick. From a drainage standpoint, as you can see, as we looked at more of a square concept of coming off of Technology and Jackson, it actually allowed us to move the regional drainage up. If you, wrong direction. If you look at the more just literal squared off at the dead ends, then the regional drainage gets moved to this southern end.
What this one shows.
Correct. Yep.
Because that Google map.
Yep.
I think that's a Google Earth map, and it hasn't shown all the latest development on it yet.
It's super old, yes.
But you got to have a connection to the east.
Correct. This was literally just to bring because we had actually started these conversations before MoCA was looking at that. It was how do we get the infrastructure south of the gas line? Because that has been the holdup of every board that has been in place before today. So how do we get the infrastructure to the south and then figure out how to design the south part? Literally just lines on a paper, gives us a starting point and a concept, but you guys can take what we've learned today and implement that on top of what we need to do for the long term.
Jean, is this not the area that we've done the geotech and the phase 1 environmental on?
Yes, thank
That's-
you for
okay.
reminding me that. We did just finish the geotech on the entire lower part of the park, which incorporates literally the top, I can just show you. Basically this line south. So everything in this whole diameter right here has had a phase 1 environmental and a geotechnical report done on it. So we're a little bit ahead of the curve.
Speaking of no curves, Bill is over here doing a little sketching and drawing, and I think you're squaring a few things off. Is that correct? Is that what you're doing over there? So what I want to maybe recommend is we meet on Monday. Bill, could you actually sketch out a new look for us that we can actually look at on Monday with what you're thinking in terms of squaring off some of that? And we don't vote on that today, but then we take that into consideration, a little bit of a different look, as well as if we want to include what we would consider an emergency exit entrance and a car entrance. Okay?
Yeah, and I can also look at large lot, small lot, what that means in the long term, but I'd like to do that with the team and just kind of sit and kind of put it together, and then I can sketch out a couple options that would be large lot option, less roads, or smaller lot options with probably an additional road future inside the complex.
Okay, if that seems like a working plan for us, I think that would be our next steps. I mean, I like options. I always like options. Take a look and make the best decision off of options. So,
and
Bill,
then you may also, on Monday, maybe you want to finalize who you're going to hire to do the drainage.
Exactly. So, Angela, I know you're taking minutes, and we'll get that onto the agenda for Monday. That'd be terrific.
It's next Monday.
Yeah. Yeah, our next meeting is Monday, so we're working on that agenda to firm that up. It's going to be a busy night. Okay, super. What else do we want to tackle in terms of discussions in the industrial park, whether we go into a deep dive tonight or today? It's not tonight.
It just feels like
and certainly put it on as a heads up for our next discussion.
What in particular were you thinking of?
I wasn't. I'm just throwing things out. If there's something else, I mean, we've talked about the toads. That's important. We got the EC out of the way. We do need to make a determination on whether or not we keep the amendment to the development agreement or whether we want to craft a new one. If people want to mull that over, and we can discuss that again on Monday when people have additional questions that they want to bring forward or have any clarification. I don't know if we're ready to vote on that. I'd have to see how you all feel about that. We don't have to vote on it today, but we can if you want to.
I think there's a couple more things that we had talked about in terms of helping to give guidance for the BDC team. One of them is the discussion about shovel ready versus non-shovel ready. And I think as a EDC, we need to be able to give the team the understanding of how to either put together a plan or don't put together a plan for shovel ready, and kind of look at that if there is a guidance we can give. And I think the other part is to be able to have the discussion on small lot versus big lot. What are we looking for? Are we looking just to keep big lots open, or do we really change and focus towards smaller lot let's say, 4-acre, 5-acre, kind of a soft spot in the middle where the outside group can't compete effectively, and it avoids the big lot where there's many people outside that can theoretically compete competitively. Because when you end up generally with a big lot, you end up with big utilities many times kind of coming in with it. And we're not really in a strength for big lot. But that's the type of discussion I think we can look at. And if that's the case, it can help work us towards sectioning off or planning off, what we offer and what we do.
Do you see it looks to me like from the average acreage, we've gotten existing projects out there that maybe we could step it up a little bit without going to 50, 60 acre tracts, something in the middle.
Yeah.
So one thing to think about is, I always think about Kevin. I want the most flexibility that's the most shovel ready. Like that's the two extremes. But if you plat with large lots, you have to replat to get to the smaller lots. If you plat with 5 to 10 acre lots, and somebody wants 20, they can buy 2 lots and you're done with the platting. The utility services are, you put those in place, you can be more shovel ready. Now, if somebody comes in and buys 3 lots, you can end up that you've done 2 water taps maybe that you didn't need, but generally that's not a super expensive part of it, but it could let you have three people that are wanting to open businesses and hire employees, and they're literally good to go. But keep in mind on the replatting, there's an amount of time that's associated with replatting, isn't there, Mr. Job?
Yeah, it generally takes about 30 days.
Okay.
Just because of the requirements to go to.
Well, and if you've already got the streets and you already know the boundaries, it's not huge. But
Right.
if somebody's wanting to start, I'm just wanting us to make sure we are making the best informed decision that we can.
Replatting is actually the last step in the process, though, so the infrastructure, everything has to be built prior to.
And we're talking about possibly building that.
Right. I did, if you want to go back to the picture that was up earlier, just to give you some of my thoughts.
You're gonna have to narrow that down. There's
Oh, I'm sorry, the one that,
35
the city
he drew,
sketch.
the one
The
he
city
drew
sketch,
sent
sorry.
you.
Gotcha.
That was it. There
No,
it
and
is.
I just want to give you some of the thought behind that. The reason it wasn't completely a straight line that hugs that odd-shaped lot is because you're limited to lot frontage that way. So all of your buildings would front that new street, which would require you to make some different adjustments on the overall street network, right? So because you don't have lot frontage, or if you just do the straight, you see the red line there? Right, your buildings would, your buildings,
This one?
sorry, the one between
This
the
one?
2 built streets, yes, where you're proposing the road. That would absolutely work, but your buildings will front that street. So just remember, when you do that, you have now, depending on how large it is, you've cut yourself out of connectivity completely, right? You actually have more usable lots this way, more lots with street frontage.
I got
Does that
you.
make sense?
Yeah. Do you get what he's saying?
Yeah, with just those and no other streets.
That's right.
Right.
But he's talking about adding additional streets to the
Right.
grid.
Well, that's what I meant. As you can
And
continue to do
Trey's
that.
just saying
Yeah.
if you do that one single street, now that's the only thing with lot frontage.
And you're starting over again if you haven't thought it all the way through. That's all
Yeah.
I'm bringing up, yeah.
Yeah, he's talking about if we do this.
Correct.
Dang it. Sorry, y'all.
That's the only road with lot frontage, and, yeah.
Correct.
You're building a road with only frontage on one side. You're not getting the efficiency out of it.
Right.
Correct.
And I think going to this concept where you subdivide and you show the larger, just kind of going back to the ideas that have been shared today, this provides you with, you can build forward and have all of your other stuff in the back and still have road frontage if you want to maintain the larger lot concept. So there's different ways to look at it. We just have to collectively figure out what that is.
But based on what has been said, you already have to subdivide the 2 lower lots because you're going to, even if you sold it as a lot, you're going to have a road through it if you're going to
Correct.
get to the east access. So that concept doesn't exist as easily with an eastern access, connectivity.
Yep.
Sorry, I'm getting there.
Connection point.
Connectivity, yeah, I get there.
And again, I mean, these are simply lines on a piece of paper.
Right.
Again, right, but it gives you,
But by Monday, they're not gonna be just lines.
sure.
They'll actually have a meaning behind them, so that we'll have
It'll be a zoning concept
connectivity.
scheme.
It'll be a scheme. Scheme,
We call it a plan instead of a scheme.
a plan, yeah.
It's called a zoning concept scheme.
It
Let's-
really is.
let's
They get
stay
both
with
of them in
scheme.
there.
That gives us a lot more flexibility as we progress forward.
And thanks, Trey, for clarifying it and getting this done for us. Appreciate it.
I think we've pretty much exhausted what we might need to have done today. I think it's been a very productive morning. I cannot thank the staff enough for pulling together all the loose ends and telling a story with pictures and maps and narrative. You went through thousands of pieces of paper. I saw them stacked up all over the conference table in the office.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
may I offer my thanks and recognition to Angela and Jean. They worked very hard and did dig through records that I never would have known where they are, and they helped in my presentation today and did an outstanding job. So
Yeah.
kudos to them, and thank y'all.
Good job.
Well,
Madam Chair, Bill Gossett has like 27 tabs.
I know he does.
And I'm wanting to give him one last chance. Is there other stuff we should talk about today? The Post-it notes of gold.
No, I think it's more sequential, that once we get these basic things done, it's gonna open up another set of questions. But I think the objective for working with the team would be to get to the EC drawing that we wanna use. And then from there, we can do a further discussion about small lot versus large lot.
Correct.
Shovel-ready versus non-shovel-ready, or half shovel-ready, or whatever. And I think that would come out of these. But again, my objective with the team would be to come up with probably a couple different layouts that would support a small lot and a large lot scheme as best we can, knowing the drainage, knowing the access requirements, and what we would look for the future.
So when we sat down, the whole point of this was, or not the whole point, but one of the big things, our number 3 was the development agreement. And it is my understanding that if we come up with a zoning concept scheme that's fairly familiar with the first amended development agreement, and we show the east and the south, that may be close enough that we don't have to update the development agreement. But I would like us to consider possibly a second amendment, if for no other reason, to get rid of phases 2 through 6, so we can quit talking about that and maybe refer to it as the industrial park, and it's the rest of the park, and we clarify the zoning is all EC. This is the zoning concept scheme that was approved in 21, and kind of have a new start point, because I think you're tired of talking about which phase 1 are we talking about, which depends on which year it is, right?
Yes, it is super confusing.
Yeah.
So I think that
would
we
be a
would-
good cleanup.
We should take the opportunity, since we're looking at it and talking about it anyway, take an opportunity to
That way we'll
clean
have
that
it
up
next
for the
time.
future.
Okay, so we won't take any votes today. We don't have to go into a formal meeting. We just need to close out the workshop and adjourn. Yes, ma'am?
I have one question. For the next workshop, I would ask, could we multitask and address the ILA? We need to move that forward. It was something I was charged with, and I would like to see that process move forward. It's been stalled now, and I think the goal was to move that forward, and I would love to see that happen. Could we put that on our next workshop agenda as well?
I think that would be really smart. I'd love to almost approach it the same way we did today. What is the history? What is the layout? What has been the discussion? What's been the holdup? What do we need to do to move forward? And then just go.
And I would like to clarify what an ILA is, since we do have a new board member, and Jeff has only heard bits and pieces of this project. So that it's an interlocal agreement between ourselves, the city, and the county, regarding a potential, it's regarding the expansion of the Technology Drive project north, as well as possibly selling the county a piece of property in the most northern part of our industrial park that would connect, yeah, it is on the map, but to connect the jail with a new justice center, just to kind of give you a little history on that. And I think in conjunction with all of the work you guys have done today regarding the development agreement and the potential schematic, that ties into being able to move the interlocal agreement forward with that project if you all would like to.
Okay, sounds good. We're actually 14 minutes earlier than we had. This has been a great 3 hours. I really feel like we've been able to hash out, get a lot of things on the table, get everybody on the same page so we can move forward. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting, and it is 11:48, and everybody have a wonderful Monday, and we'll be seeing each other again on next Monday, and Kevin and Janora and I will be at the TEDC conference, taking a look at everything, and maybe have some things to report back. I'm not sure. We'll see this week. Thank you.